Good morning, everyone. It's the top of the hour. I'm Luli Castro, Swiftland's Executive Director, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to this morning's webinar, RDA Authority Records. We have a wonderful learning opportunity ready for you this morning with Dr. Karen Snow, who is back by popular demand. Dr. Snow is let me introduce you. Dr. Snow is an assistant professor in the Graduate School of Library and Information Science at Dominican University in River Forest, Illinois. She received her PhD in Information Science in 2011 from the University of North Texas, where she taught cataloging resources primarily online from 2006 until 2011 for the Department of Library and Information Sciences. She previously worked as a cataloger in the Rare Book Room at the University Archives and the Technical Services Departments at the University of North Texas. She currently teaches beginning and advanced cataloging courses at Dominican University, both face-to-face and online. So she's quite the rock star. Please welcome Dr. Snow and enjoy her webinar this morning.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Luli, for that wonderful introduction. Good morning, everyone. I hope you're ready for some more RDA today. And I thought, because we've really been focused on RDA, the use of RDA and the creation of bibliographic records since last year, since we started our webinar series last year, and during the face-to-face sessions, we really focused on how it's being used in bibliographic records. And we haven't really talked much about how it's changed authority records, which, I feel that's important, that we need to know that as well. So I thought we'd go ahead and have a webinar on this. So I can't cover everything. Obviously, we just have an hour, so that I can't cover everything. But I thought I'd at least go through some of the more visible changes you would see in like preferred forms of names, for example, and also some of the many new fields that you'll see in RDA authority records. And also, since I don't really know, everyone's level of knowledge with, authority control and authority data, I thought that I'd kind of start off giving just a very brief background on authority work, and then move in to the changes that you would see in an authority record. So let's go ahead and get started. And it's as always, as you guys know, if you've been in a webinar with me before, you know that I'm very much open to any comments or questions that you have during the session. Just make a comment in the chat area, and I'll be monitoring that throughout the session, so I can kind of address any questions or concerns that you have throughout the session. Okay, so don't feel scared to do that. I'm very much open to that. So as long as it doesn't sidetrack us too much, I'm open to talking about whatever you guys are concerned about. So first things first, let's talk a little bit about what is authority control. And as Doris Clack says here, it's a technical process executed on a library catalog to provide structure. Uniqueness, standardization, and linkages are the foundation of authority control. And Puff Daddy is one of my favorite poster boys for this concept, just because this rapper, producer, actor, whatever, he's changed his name so many times throughout his career on a whim, it seems. So how do we ensure that our users can find everything that he's done? If they're looking for all of his albums or various things that he's done, we don't want them to have to look up, Diddy, Puff Daddy, P. Diddy, Sean Combs, the various forms of his names that he's taken over the years to find everything that they're looking for. So we just decide to use one preferred form of his name to then use that in all of his records so that you can find everything that he's done. So, and I think he's actually changed it right now. I think, well, I can show you. I'll show you his authority record, speaking of which. It's currently still Diddy, but I think he's one of his latest works. He's gone back to Puff Daddy, so I expect this to be changing any time now, which is problematic in my courses, because I use this so much in my courses. I have to go back and change a bunch of screenshots. But whatever, I knew this coming in, that that's a chance that would that would, obviously would happen with him. But anyway, so here's the authority record for Diddy. And I know that some of you guys maybe, don't, maybe not even use full authority control in your catalogs and so forth, so you may not deal with this on a regular basis, but just so you're aware, this is an authority record within the Library of Congress Authorities website, so that in that upper right-hand corner, authorities.loc.gov is where you can access authority records for, names, corporate bodies, subjects for free, the Library of Congress. And you can see here that, this has not been RDA-ified, if you will, because there's the authority file is kind of in various states of being RDA-ified. They're kind of moving in stages to do that. But here, in the 100 field, we have the preferred form of the name, 400 fields are variant forms, and then like the 670s are essentially kind of note fields and so forth within the authority record. So even though it looks kind of like a bib record, right? It looks like a bibliographic record. The MARC fields are different. It's MARC authority data and not bibliographic data that we're dealing with. But here's just an example. I want to actually give this. I don't want to forget. I have a full like Charles Dickens authority record that kind of points out the new fields and the various parts of the authority record that I want to send to you guys as well, so you have kind of a reference for what everything means. So that's why this kind of looks like it's taken from another document, because it is. So we have, as I said, the preferred form of the name in the 100 field. There can only be one. It's what I like to call my Highlander principle. There can only be one, right? So only be one 100 field, because that is, you only want to have one preferred form of name, right? You don't want to have multiple preferred forms of names, because that contradicts the whole principle of authority control, right? Though you can have many different variant forms, as many as you need. These 400 fields are C from tracings from of the preferred name, and these list out all the different forms that a user may search, and then hopefully they'll be directed to the preferred form so that all works by Charles Dickens, if you're looking for him as an author, will come up in a search. And notice that this record has, and it's not the full record, obviously, but it has some fields that the Diddy record did not have, or does not have yet, I guess I should say. This, 372, 374, 375, 377, 378, these are all new RDA fields that you would only find in an authority record. You're not gonna see these in bibliographic records, okay? So don't think, oh, there's something else I'm missing in addition to like those 336, 337, 338 series. No, it's not anything like this. This is only for the authority records. So and that's it. You don't need to put these in bib records at all. And authority records, I mean, you can actually have many different authority records informing a bibliographic record, right? So like this one record for Arlene Taylor and Daniel Jodres, the organizational information is informed by, I'd like to say, more than just these three. These are just kind of the examples I provide, but the authority record for Arlene Taylor, for example, establishing her preferred form, and in Danny Jodres, preferred form and so forth, but also subjects like information organization. Those have their own authority records as well as series. I don't have the series one here, but that also has an authority record for series to establish a preferred form of a series title that's placed in the 830 field, right, or 800 if you have like a name title. So there's many different authority records informing just one bibliographic record. But they're very important, right? Like I said, in order to maintain proper authority control, it's important to have these established names to do that. So if you want to look up the MARC authority data, like what all the fields mean, you can look at the Library of Congress MARC 21 format for authority data website, which I have the URL here. This way it makes it easy to kind of figure out, okay, what does this field mean and how should I structure the data in there and so on and so forth. I find that me personally, I find that the Library of Congress MARC websites, because they have a bibliographic data website as well, I just don't find them as helpful at times as like the OCLC MARC website, but I don't believe at this point OCLC has the authority data mark, but I could be wrong. But this is the main source for MARC authority data here, that website. And just once again, I'm not going to belabor these points, but just to kind of point out that just like in the the bibliographic MARC, it has, an organization to it. It has, like for example, 0xx are controlled field standard numbers. 1xx is the authorized access point, so that can be like a 100, 110, 111, and so forth. The 3xx fields that's where most of the new RDA entity attributes are recorded, which we'll talk more about. Then the variant access points are in the 4xx, and so that'll be, like I said, different depending on what you have, like a person, corporate body, and so forth. 5xx are links to related entities, and 6xx notes and series treatment. And here's just kind of that, that structure as well. That the 00 would be persons and families, or works or expressions with a person or family as creator. So like a name title entry, right? But yeah, so like a 100 field or a 400 field and so forth. Same with corporate bodies, meetings, events, expeditions, and so forth. So same thing that what you're used to dealing with in bibliographic records, right? So this should not be new to you guys. This is the same structure in authority records as well. And there's just some examples of that within an authority record, like you have John Smith, the personal name, the preferred form in the 100 field, and then the variant forms in 400 fields, groups, musical groups and their corporate bodies in AACR2, as well as RDA, so in 110 fields and 410 fields, and so on and so forth. This is just to kind of give you an example of what I meant, what I meant by the stuff in the previous slide, if that was confusing. So, okay, and then here's just an example of when I was talking about, related entities, that 5xx field in authority records, which is a little different. I mean, in these names in the 500 fields, right, they're still variant forms in a sense of like Nora Roberts, for example, but they are preferred forms of names that are established identities separate from that author. So, for example, Sarah Hardesty, I say, it's the preferred form of a name for romantic works written under this pseudonym in the United Kingdom. And so because it's a separate identity, there's a separate authority record established for that identity. Even though it's still Nora Roberts, because she's established a separate identity, there's a separate authority record for her that's separate from Nora Roberts. And this 500 field kind of links Nora Roberts to that other identity. So, and like I said, this is pretty much the same, almost exactly the same as under RDA as it was under AACR2, and that hasn't changed. Okay, none of this has changed. So you're going to see the same stuff in RDA authority records that you do in AACR2 record, at least in this regard. So, yes. So that's the main difference, between the 400 and 500 fields, right? So the 400s are just kind of variant forms that don't have an established authority record for them, whereas the 500s do. So. Okay, so let's get to the new MARC fields, and I'm not, like I said, I don't have the time to cover all of these, but please feel free to, like I said, look at the the MARC authority data website, and I also have a list of recommended readings at the end of this presentation that you can look at further information about these fields. But most of them are going to be a 3 something field, like the 336 content type and 368 other attributes of person or corporate body and so forth. But there's this 046 that I want to talk about today, and so forth. And in some of these, I mean, just like, with any field, quite frankly, is that you're going to need some fields for certain things and not for others, okay? So if you have, a person and you're trying to establish the preferred name of a person, and you want to add these fields, you're not going to have a content type necessarily. That's primarily for describing the content of a work. So if you're establishing an authority record for a work, then you would use that, the 336, an authority record. But same thing for work. For a work, you're not going to have that 375 for gender, right? Because a work won't have a gender usually, so you're not going to need that field. So it just, so the use of these fields will often depend on what you're trying to describe in the authority record, right? So, so here's some, and then here's some more. Actually, that wasn't all the new fields. There's actually quite a few new fields in RDA authority records. In the 678, the biographical or historical data, it's actually not a new field, but according to this, it's been given new life and more use under RDA. So it's kind of a free text field, kind of to talk about the person or corporate body or work and so forth. So, so there you go. There's all the new fields to kind of give us more information about the person or thing in the authority record. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight some of the changes in preferred forms of personal names that you'll find in an RDA authority record, and then cover some of the new RDA authority fields and what you should put in them, essentially. So I'm going to focus primarily on the 046, 370, 372, 374, 375, and 377. So, so there you go. I'm going to look at those, just because. Okay, so let's talk about dates. Okay, so this you may be curious, you know, if you're looking at RDA authority records, you know, what's going on with the differences in the dates. And under AACR2, this is covered in Rule 22.17, which says to add a person's dates, like birth, death, etc., in the form given below within AACR2 as the last element of a heading, if the heading is otherwise identical to another. Okay, so under AACR2, you are not really supposed to add any dates associated with the person unless the heading is identical to some other heading. So the name was the same as someone else's name, so kind of to differentiate one from another. But it does give the option to add a date to any personal name, even if there's no need to distinguish between the headings. So it does give that option, and it's pretty much the same under RDA. Which I'll show you just in a moment. This is covered under 9313 in RDA, so recording dates associated with persons. But one kind of key difference is the fact that this is a core element in RDA, the dates. Okay, this does not mean that the dates are core in the name field, if you know what I'm talking about. So if you're establishing a preferred form of name, you don't have to put it after the name of the person, but it needs to be somewhere in the authority record. Okay, so with the further information discussing the person. Okay, so it is core. We do need to include it somewhere. If it's not in the name, then we need to include it somewhere else in addition to that. So, and I'll talk a little bit more about what I mean about that in just a minute. So it does say, you know, record dates as separate elements, as parts of access points, or both. Okay, so that's what we're talking about. We can actually record it as a separate element if we want. We don't have to record it as part of the access point itself, the preferred form of name. And there's additional instructions, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So what you see here is pretty much exactly the same. The rule is actually the same as the ACR2 rule, is that, you know, you add the date of birth or the date of death if needed to distinguish one access point from another. So you record the year alone, add the month or day, month and day, and if you need to distinguish one access point from another. And then the optional addition is to add that even if there's no need to distinguish between the access points. So exactly the same idea here, just kind of written in a slightly different way. Okay, so that's what a lot of, I guess, in a sense, one of the good things about RDA when you're trying to move from ACR2 to RDA is that really there's quite a few RDA, I can't say rules, they're guidelines or instructions, right, that are pretty much exactly the same as under ACR2. It's strikingly similar in many ways. So that's one thing that is similar. So let's look at some examples, okay, what we're talking about, how AACR2, even though the rules look pretty much the same, how the output is going to look different. And many of them will actually look exactly the same. So for example, in that first row here, so John Smith, who was born in 1924 and is still alive, he's a living person, you can actually record these in two different ways according to RDA. If you look at the examples in RDA, you can record it the same way that we did under AACR2, and none of this contains the mark, by the way. This is just straight up, you know, the data that without the mark coding. We can record it as, you know, John Smith, 1924, hyphen, to show that he's still alive, or we could just put born 1924, and that's fine under RDA. So either way is acceptable, okay? And then In order to differentiate between two people who were born in the same year and have the same name, you still put, the month and day after the year, but, just, RDA likes everything written out if possible, unless it's that way on the item itself. So here, as opposed to abbreviating January, for example, JAN period, we write out January. So pretty much exactly the same, just the abbreviation's written out. It's the same if both years are known, so we know when John Smith was born and when he died. Bam, exactly the same. Same thing for probable year of birth. So probable year, you pretty much know the birth year within like a couple years. You put a question mark after that, after the birth date, and I believe it's the same thing with the death date. I didn't include everything in here because there's quite a long list of what you should do, but I just kind of included the main stuff. A big change though is this year of birth uncertain by several years. So you know that it might be around 1837, but you don't know within a few years if that's correct. We used to put circa, right? CA period, space 1837 through 1896. Now, because RDA is very kind of anti-Latin abbreviation and abbreviation period, they say to write out approximately. Right, yeah, right, approximately as opposed to CA period. And same thing with the death dates, right? And I didn't include this on here. It would have been so long. But I'm going to write out in the chat box kind of what this would look like if the birth and death dates are uncertain by several years. So you'd have John Smith, comma, approximately 1837, hyphen, approximately 1896. Okay, so that's quite a mouthful and quite long, but that is what they say to do, so that we can avoid the whole abbreviation and a Latin abbreviation thing. Okay. So anyway, and then now once again we're kind of moving more into how things are different, and it's slight. I mean, some of these are not major differences, but they are differences, right? So if we have a year of death that's unknown, we used to put B period, 1825. If we know that John Smith was born in 1825, we just don't know when he died, but we know he's dead, presumably, unless this guy really lives an insanely long life. Then you just put the born date, and that's fine. According to RDA, we just put born 1825. However, the Library of Congress and the Program for Cooperative Cataloging have their own guidelines for this. Okay, you guys, I've already talked about the LC, PCC, PSs, right? The policy statements that they have that kind of say, no, we're not going to follow RDA to the letter here. We kind of have our own policies on how to deal with this, and so they decided amongst themselves that they are not going to use born written out, but have 1825 hyphen. Okay, even if we are like 100% certain that this guy is not dead or is not alive, right? He was born in 1825 and cannot be alive now physically. We still just treat it as if there might be a death date. I mean, maybe we will find out, when he died eventually, but who knows? But that's how they're going to treat that. Okay, so that's how they're going to deal with it. Same thing with the year of birth unknown, where we just put D period 1859. Now they have the hyphen 1859 to represent that, even though RDA has the example of died 1859. So once again, these both are valid ways of doing this, but you'll see, I would think most of the new authority records coming out, which are created by, many of which are created by LC and PCC, will have this, the hyphen before the 1859, which in my mind looks just really weird, but that's just me. I just think it's weird. And then finally, the some years of activity known. So we don't know a birth date or a death date. We used to put, like flourished, but FL period to represent flourished from 1567 to 1587. We have to write that out now. So flourished written out, or according to LC, PCC, they write active. Okay, so you may see this written either way, and either way is fine. Either way is valid. Okay, so it's not one, both of them are right. Both of them are correct. Okay. Okay. So there you go. Any questions about that? Is that helpful in terms of seeing how these preferred forms of names, and this does affect how your bib records too. It affects the bib records because this is the preferred forms that you take from the authority record and place in the bib record, right? In like the 100 field of the bib record. So it does affect what you see in the bib record as well, how it differs. So additional information, just once again, a few things you'll see different in the preferred forms of names. So in order to distinguish one name from another, and you want to use the date of birth or the death date if you know that, a fuller form of name if you know that, or a period of activity of the person. Okay, so that's preferred under RDA, and it's pretty much the same under AACR2 as well. But I think the difference, though, the slight difference between AACR2 and RDA in this regard is that RDA kind of prizes the profession or occupation then over anything else. Once you've kind of exhausted other avenues of finding the birth and death date and the fuller form of name and the period of activity, they want you then to put the profession or occupation if that's known. So for like John Smith, Sir John Smith, if you know that he's a notary, for example, RDA says to prefer to have the profession, occupation, in subfield C in parentheses after the name. Okay, so same thing with Reverend George Brown. You put clergyman instead to make it more clear, I suppose, who this person is and so forth. Also, RDA does allow the inclusion of words indicating relationship following surnames, which is something that we just never did under ACR2. We did not include like junior, for example, within a preferred form of name. We just had the dates to distinguish junior from senior, for example, right? But under RDA, it's fine to insert the junior, if you have a junior or a senior or the third, and if you want to make it more clear to our users, we're talking about a junior or a senior and so forth. Okay, because sometimes it was hard. If you looked at it long enough, you say, okay, this person was born before the other person, so yeah, this must be senior and this must be junior. But at least this creates more clarity in that regard. So let's move on to the actual new fields that you're going to see in RDA authority records, starting with this 046 field. This is special coded dates. Okay, and this is, as you can see here, I have a screenshot from RDA, Rule 9.3, is that date associated with the person is a core element. This kind of comes back to what I was talking about previously, about how dates are core, right? And for names associated with a person, even if they're not within the preferred form of name, after that, after the name, we need to put them somewhere. Okay, so this is that somewhere other than the name that we put the dates, but it's in coded form. Okay, so this what makes it a little bit more tricky. And then the second screenshot here is just from the LC Mark Authority Data website, kind of giving the the indicators, which are both blank for this field, and then the different subfield codes here. So they have subfield F, for example, for the birth date, and subfield G for the death date. But this can be used for also works and other things as well, so it doesn't have to be just for personal names. So here is a chart. This is from Adam Schiff, who is just fabulous. I included a link to his homepage at the end of this because he's written a lot, created a lot of great presentations on not just authority data, but all sorts of RDA related stuff that I'd highly recommend that you guys take a look at. He's great at providing examples. So this contains dates usually recorded according to the representations of dates and times, the ISO 8601 standard. And you want to record it according to this template in the second bullet. So you want to record, if you just know a year, for example, you just put the year, like I have in this first example, so the year born 1911. You have subfield F, 1911. If you know a year and a month, you can also record that, but year hyphen and then the month, but 2 digits. So if it was someone born April of 1910, you record that as 1911 hyphen 04. And then if you know a specific day, you can also record that, but with no hyphens. You put 1911 04 15 for someone born April 15th, 1911. And we can do this for so AD early AD dates and also BC dates, and also for if you just know like when someone is active or flourished, we can record that as well, just kind of a little bit differently with the subfield S. If you just know a century, you just put, so this is the 1900s, right? Then 20th century, so you just put 19. It's according to this standard, this ISO 8601 standard is how you represent that. So, and just because it's, like I said, you can have this information after the preferred form of someone's name as well, and maybe not to this level of detail. But if you know someone's actual, birth month and birthday, then you can record that here without necessarily recording that in the preferred form as well. So here's just an example of that. The 046 field, this is from the Charles Dickens authority record. This first field that you see here at the top, the 046, this contains, the subfield F, that's his birth date, which includes both the month and the day he was born, which we don't have in that 100 field, right? But that's fine, which is just kind of more information. And then subfield G has his death date, his, June 9th, 1870. So I just kind of have to get used to looking at, that the ISO, format there, and having, the year first, and then, yeah, the month and then the day, yeah, month and day there. So. So there you go. You need to record that somewhere. So if, like it said in the rule, you can have it both places, or just in the access point, that 100 field, or just in the 046 field. But it has to be somewhere. You have to have the dates somewhere. You have to, yeah, that's core. That's required. Okay. So now that we've, looked at that 046 field, so you can understand what all those mini numbers mean there, let's move on to these fields that are not quite as number focused. And these are actually terms that we'll use in these 37X field. And it's PCC policy to use controlled vocabularies whenever possible in these fields. And, but that's not always going to be the case. RDA and the policies of the Library of Congress and the Program for Cooperative Cataloging may differ. So that's why you're going to see lots of different variations of how these appear in authority records, the information in these 37X fields. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're wrong, right? They're just different. I mean, that's that's like the catchphrase, like the everything about RDA is that there's lots of differences, but they're not necessarily wrong, and that there's just going to be a lot of variation in RDA data, either in bibliographic records or authority records. That's just how it is. And I'll just use examples of both, just because I think it's good to see it both ways. So let's start with the 370 field, associated place. So for our purposes, since we're primarily focused on the person, this field is used to transcribe the town, city, province, state, and or country associated with a person's place of birth, death, residence, and or identity. So just really any place that's associated with the person, like that you know that they were born, died, or resided for a length of time. Okay, so but we can also use this for corporate bodies and families, as well as works or expressions, like so the country or territorial jurisdiction from which a work or expression originated. So if you know that a work was written in the United States, for example, or written in Russia, you can transcribe this information there. And like I said, this is not required really. Like other than the dates field that I just talked about, none of these are necessarily required. I mean, you're encouraged to include this information, but they're not required parts of these records. So you are going to see RDA authority records in different, with different amounts of data included in them because of that. So here's just the 370 field page and the MARC authority data website with the different, for all of these fields, none of the indicators, you're not going to have anything for the first and second indicators. And then many different subfields that you can have here as well. So let's go back to Charles Dickens again. So we're looking at the 370 field here. We can see that according to our subfield codes on the LC MARC website, that subfield A is place of birth, and subfield B is place of death. So we just have, Portsea Island, England is his place of birth, and then Higham, Kent, England is his place of death. And that's all that's included in this particular authority record, but we could go on. I mean, we could say his associated country is England, right, easily, because he's English, so we could have a subfield C here as well. But just for whatever reason, the cataloger decided to kind of stop there. We'd also have, place of residence or headquarters and really anything else that we want here. And then as you can see here, the NR means it's not repeatable. So you really only have one place of birth, right, and one place of death. But everything else is, or except for the start period, is repeatable. That's that little R means there. So yay, there you go. So your first 370. And then here's just the RDA rule associated with this particular field, the 370 field. So precede the name of a larger place by a comma when the place name is used in the following elements. So a place associated with the person, that's for our purposes, that fourth one down, a place associated with the person is what we're dealing with here. And I wanted to point this out. So here, like Budapest, comma, Hungary. Okay, so that's how they say to transcribe this information. I just want to point that out because, of course, the LC-PCC policy is different. Which I'm like, come on, people, get on the same page, but whatever. But as of 2013, so as of just last year, the PCC and Library of Congress, for that matter, say to use a control vocabulary, like I said before. They say to use a control vocabulary whenever possible. So instead of having, Salem, comma, Oregon written out, they say use, the name authority file, the LC, PCC name authority file, and transcribe the geographic place according to the preferred form of that place. Okay, so that's why I have these examples here of a 370 Salem and then Oregon, OR period in parentheses, and then subfield 2 NAF, that's the name authority file of the Library of Congress and PCC. So, which is good in a sense when you think about it. You want to try to have, standardized forms of names whenever possible. That helps with the authority control, but it just kind of makes it difficult. To ensure that we're using these things consistently and having a consistent authority record. So there you go. So you'll see it both ways. Like I said, we have our Dickens, which may not have the preferred form of the geographic names here, but there you go. Okay, so 372, field of activity. So for a person, this is a field of endeavor, area of expertise in which a person is engaged or was engaged, and so forth. And this could be repeated if the entity has multiple fields of activity for different time periods. So here is the example for Charles Dickens. And note that this element represents a discipline and not an occupation. Okay, so here the 372 field represents his field of activity, which is literature, but his occupation, which goes to the 374 field, is author. So there you go. And I think I'll have a slide kind of going into a little bit more detail about that in just a second, but because it may seem kind of redundant, but it's different, right? So there you go. So here's the field of activity. Once again, indicators are blank, and you want to have the field of activity in subfield A, so on and so forth. But you may see this done in different ways, because it seems like, at least according to like the rules and everything else, you can have multiple 372 fields. Sorry, let me go back. Yeah, it has an R, so it's repeatable, right? So it's a repeatable field. This 372 field is repeatable, but some are just kind of shoving all of the the terms into one field and having multiple subfield A's. So here, this is for the author James Patterson. We have a 372 field for like suspense fiction, American, as well as advertising. So these are fields of activity. They're not occupations. This is not it shows that in our 374 that he's a novelist and was an advertising executive. May not have known that, but he was apparently. So there you go. But like I said, you may also see it as multiple 372 fields as well. In this case, I yeah, I'm not quite sure exactly why the person who created this decided to do it this way, but there you go. It may be helpful as well, especially if these two terms are coming from the same control vocabulary, like Library of Congress subject headings. It says in subfield 2 that that's where these come from. Is to kind of, save the time in putting, adding that twice. So, but there you go. But you'll see it different ways. So speaking of the 374 field, the occupation field, so this is information about the profession or occupation in which a person works or has worked. So it's not just what they're currently doing, but what they did do as well, if you know it. Okay, with some of this stuff, you may not know it, right? You may not know that information, so you can't transcribe it. But like I said, this is not required, so you don't have to, well, this one's core. This particular one's core, but many of the other ones are not. So you need to try to include this one if at all possible. So, and then this field is repeated if the person has multiple occupations for different time periods. And here, so it says, profession or occupation under this 9.16 rule in RDA. It says the profession or occupation is a core element for a person whose name consists of a phrase or appellation not conveying the idea of a person. So in a sense, I'm sort of saying it is core element for some, but not all. Because for other persons, profession or occupation is a core element when you need to distinguish a person from another person with the same name. So kind of like the dates. Date situation, it's needed. But otherwise, only if the person's name is not very namey, is not very person-y, do you need to have the profession or occupation. So here's just one example. I think I got this from like the Robert Maxwell's Handbook for RDA, which is also fabulous information for this stuff. Is this 3 by 3, or 3 times 3 is 9. I never even heard of this person. I just thought this was a good example. But this is a musician whose real name is Chris Bryan, who goes by the stage name 3 times 3 is 9. And since it's not, you wouldn't necessarily know just by looking at 3 times 3 is 9 is a person, that's why it is required. It is therefore core to add subfield C, musician, after to show this is a musician. Oh, and Nancy, and I have the citation for it at the end of this presentation, but it's called Maxwell's Handbook for RDA by Robert Maxwell, and it's massive. I mean, I'm sure some of you guys have seen it already. It's like 900 pages of just RDA goodness. It's like, but it covers both bibliographic, like Mark bibliographic, like RDA. Mark bibliographic, as well as authority data information. So I highly recommend it if just for like the examples alone. He gives a lot of great examples and kind of illustrates the RDA rules for both bib records and authority records. So anyway, but there you go. So here, that's the only situation, other than a situation where you have the same name and you're unable to differentiate names, using like dates or fuller forms or anything, then you need to add this occupation or profession. Yeah, there, it's appellation. So there you go. There's that example. So here you go. Here's the 374 field within the LC authority data website. That in subfield A we put the occupation, and then if we know, the start period or the end period of that, then we can include that, but we don't have to. I mean, if we know that. But so here's an example of Charlotte Bronte, where they do use that subfield S and subfield T to show that, okay, she was a novelist from 1833 to 1855, and a poet in 1846, and a governess from 1839 to 1841. So I mean, if you know the start and end dates of these type, what they did, that's fine. But like I said, you don't have to. So I just showed the James Patterson one again to show, how it can be done with it just using one 374 field. He's a novelist, as well as an advertising executive. And in this particular case, the cataloger chose to use Library of Congress subject headings as the preferred, the control vocabulary for this. And then, in here, the Charlotte Bronte, obviously, the person used the 374 field separately, which makes sense. If kind of lumping all this, with the start and end dates, I think would be really quite cluttered in one 374 field. So that kind of makes sense to do that. So, and if the term is not from a controlled vocabulary, prefers singular rather than plural. That's the rules. So, bam. You can also use terms from other controlled vocabularies, so you don't have to just use Library of Congress subject headings if you don't want to. I mean, you can use really whatever you want as long as you note it in the subfield 2. So here's an example of an authority record where the cataloger chose to use a term from MESH for the medical subject headings list, and that's that first 374 field, so faculty, comma, dental, subfield 2, MESH, and that's fine. Whatever you choose to use as long as you note it, right? We can also use the U.S. Department of Labor's Dictionary of Occupational Titles if we choose, so that's subfield 2 dot, so art conservator dot if we want to. And that's fine. Like I said, it's fine. We don't always have to use Library of Congress subject headings or the name authority file for things. So gender, it's been kind of a more controversial one to add. But it still can be helpful in many instances. So information about the gender of a person, including dates, if applicable. And here within RDA, it says you can use the appropriate term from this list, so female, male, or not known. Or you can, if none of these terms is appropriate or sufficiently specific, record an appropriate term or phrase. So have an example like intersex or transsexual woman and so forth. And here's just an example of that, well, not of that, but of the use of male or female within, the Charles Dickens. Let's see. Hold on. I think that, I don't know if Luli or Jose are available right now, but I'm sorry, I hate to interrupt this, but I'm getting a warning that all named hosts have left the meeting, and so I'll be changed to a participant in just a minute. So I want to make sure that that I can actually continue speaking after 5 minutes. So I don't know if Jose or Luli are listening, but I may need them to come back in just a minute to do something. Okay. Okay, so anyway, so we have male here listed in the 375 field, and we can list, the start. Okay, good. Okay, thank you. Luli came back. Thank you. Thank you. I've never seen that happen before, so it was kind of weird. So the start and end periods tend to be used with transgendered persons if you know kind of when they started being a certain gender and when, they started it ended using that gender. So, but it's not just about that. I mean, this particular field can be very helpful if you can't quite tell the gender of the person just by looking at their name. So if the name, at least from your point of view, is gender ambiguous, then it's helpful to know. So here's just an example of a a transgendered person, Chaz Bono, who started life as a female, and so here's the start and end dates of her time as, or I guess his time as a female from 1969 to 2008, though it's uncertain whether that happened exactly in 2008. And then a second 375 field, so it's repeatable, of when he began his life as a male in 2008 ? So there you go, and it's kind of interesting, this one, just because why it's just the gender information here. There's not the additional new RDA field. So I'm like, oh, come on, if you're going to add this, you might as well fill out the other stuff too, right? So, but anyway, so there you go. And then the associated language. This one's pretty straightforward. The associated language. So the language is associated with the entity described in the record. So the language of the person that they used when writing for publication, etc. And you want to use the MARC code list for languages for this one. So the same list that you use for like the Lang fixed field, the 041 field is what you use for this. And if you don't want to use that list, you can use another list. That's fine. So here we have this one person who This is the same mesh person from they use the medical subject headings for the 374. This person writes in both Japanese and in English, and that's represented in the 377 field is JPN and ENG in separate subfield A's. So we can repeat this if there are multiple languages that the person writes in primarily. So, and this includes fictional characters as well. And I didn't get into this now because it's a little separate in my mind. This idea of fictional characters being people in essence in RDA, which now, if you haven't been following the controversy that the fictional characters from like the Library of Congress subject headings, like Geronimo Stilton, for example, or Harry Potter, are being moved to the name authority file, and because of that, we can add all these different RDA fields to show that this is a male fictional character, that language is Italian, because the author of these books that kind of use Geronimo Stilton as the the pseudonym, right? It's writing under that name. It's a mouse. It's a learned and brainy mouse, according to this editor of the Rodent Gazette. The original author of this is Italian, so it was originally written in Italian, and so therefore that is the language of Geronimo Stilton, even though it's been translated obviously into many other languages. So it should be just the language that it was originally written in, presumably of the person. So yeah, it's kind of crazy to think about that, but we do kind of specify, even if fictitious character is not in the preferred form of the name, like in the 100 field, it just says Geronimo Stilton, right, without fictitious character. We do need to note that in this 368 field, which I didn't get to in this webinar, but we want to record that there, and so forth. So so in a sense, you kind of treat them like a person. Like you see this 678. I kind of mentioned this at the beginning. This is kind of like a a narrative version, kind of describing the person or entity, if you will, the identity. Geronimo Stilton is a mouse and fictitious author. So there you go. So language a person uses when writing for publication. And like I said, there's some records that have this, some not. I mean, right now the name authority file is in various stages of completeness, and including this stuff. And I know the PCC is working hard to include in as many records as possible these new fields. But there you go. Not all of them will have this. So let's think about the implications of this. Oh, okay. Guy has a question. Hold on. The month it was accessed on Wiki 670 is abbreviated. Is that the proper form? Let's see. It was accessed. Hold on, just okay. Wikipedia website, April 15th, 2013. Well, you know what? In Guy, I think that, and that's a good question, because at least my understanding when I've studied the authority data, and this was kind of the case to a certain extent under AACR2 as well, is that these 670 fields were, are essentially node fields. The structure of those, like what you put in there, is not always covered in the rules and how you should do it. So at least from what I remember, RDA does not specify that, okay, you need to write out April in the 670 field. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's the same thing in the bib records, right? For the node fields, it's not always clear. It doesn't give you direct instruction on how you should transcribe it. So it's the same thing for RDA, is that as long as it's clear what you're talking about, you can kind of transcribe it how you want. So in this particular case, it probably would have been better, I guess, in the true RDA spirit to write out April. Right, I think, Nancy, exactly. As long as you are consistent and it's clear what you're talking about, I think that's the important thing. So, exactly. So, but, the implications of this, because you may be just wondering, okay, really, what is the point? What is the point of adding all this additional stuff? And and right now, because of our systems, and I've already kind of gotten on my soapbox about this before and in various other webinars and face-to-face, is that, because our current systems are not really set up to really take advantage of a lot of the information and relationships that RDA tries to spotlight here with our data, we can't really do or answer, questions, using our data as well as we would like. Like, for example, this is once again from Adam Schiff, who poses these questions like, okay, so what if we have a user who wants, whatever poetry you have by Oregon authors, or what, do you have music by French women composers of the 19th century? How about recordings of rock bands from Portland, and and so on and so forth? Using this data, if we include, the occupation and, the time period the person lived and the gender and all, there's other stuff in the authority records, in theory, in the future, when we have, systems that can better take advantage of this information and the authority records, we will be able to more easily answer these questions for our patrons. Because, right now we can maybe add, some of this information into the bib record, but we just haven't really been able to properly fully take advantage of the information provided in authority records, right? Because when you search an OPAC, it doesn't come up with the authority record for the most part, right? You're searching the bib record. So yeah. So like I said, like right now, our catalogs don't fully, have these capabilities, but hopefully in the future, we'll have better systems that can better, enable us to answer these types of questions that users may be interested in that, having answers to, right? So, anyway, it's always good to provide the full information if you can, even if it's not required, just so that we can have more information available to us to answer these types of questions. So, like those, yeah, on catalog cards. So, but anyway, so just, you can use your imagination of how you can possibly use this information. But here you go. Here's that list I was talking about. Adam Schiff's homepage, like I said, is always chock full of great information. He's always posting presentations that he's given and so forth. It's great. Also check out the Library of Congress Program for Cooperative Cataloging website. Here's just kind of the changes that they're doing in phases. Okay, there's like 3 phases. I think they're in phase 3 now, in what they're doing to update the authority file, and the examples of full RDA records. There's not only bib records there, but also authority records you can check out from the Joint Steering Committee, created RDA, and then here's that. That RDA, the Maxwell's Handbook for RDA that I was talking about earlier, including the ISBN if you want to get that. So, it's a great resource. It's massive, but it's a really great resource for RDA. So anyway, that's all I have for today. And the next, I don't have another webinar scheduled, but we do have a face-to-face workshop coming up at the end of August that I hope you guys can attend. I hope to see you all. On Wednesday, August 27th, we'll be getting into the icky stuff, as I like to say, quote-unquote icky stuff of RDA, which I'm excited about. And yeah, I'd love to see you guys there. So in the meantime, if you have any questions, as always, please feel free to email me, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. Otherwise, have a great weekend. Thanks for attending.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Snow, for another wonderful webinar. That's the phone ringing. Somebody in this was
Whoops. Oh, and by the way, sorry, I shouldn't have cut it off. So I can stick around for a few minutes if anyone has any questions. But yeah, yeah, I'll stick around if anyone has any questions.
Yes, I will too. Thanks for the sneak preview of what's coming up. And attendees, I know that for some of you that are far, far away, it would be a great ride across or down from the state, so that you could participate in Dr. Snow's face-to-face workshop on August 27th, where we will be cataloging icky stuff and icky people.
Yeah, we're going to catalog Luli.
Oh, you gave it away. But yeah, August, I'm the icky one. August 27th here at the Swiftland office, all day, because it will take all day to catalog me. So please register. Check the Swiftland website. There is a link there, and you're able to register and come to the workshop. It will be picking up from where we started in May, but I don't think that if you've gone through the series and you've paid attention to all of the webinars that Dr. Snow has done, that you would be lost if you came in to the Advanced RDA class on August 27th. So please register and continue your path of RDA learning. And keep checking our CE calendar, because she will be scheduled for further webinars. She will. And she will also be scheduled for further visits to our area. If you haven't liked us on Facebook yet, please make sure that you do, because that's another way many of you know that as soon as we finalize our events, we do put them up on Facebook, so they immediately come into your feed. You can check my tweeting skills, because we do put them up on Twitter, or you can look for your friendly message in the listserv. So lots of ways that we're trying to reach out to you, and hope that we do reach you. Thank you, everybody, for attending, and have a terrific weekend.
Okay.
I know, Guy. Yeah, this would have been great.
Oh, whoops. Yeah, thank you. Let me, yeah, great, Guy, thanks for pointing that. I just noticed that myself, that I did not, I need to find the appropriate link, because I think that the link is for that LCPCC one, and I will change that. I will change that, and I will get it to Luli, so that when you guys get a copy of this, and you are going to get a copy of this, by the way, it'll have the correct link on there. So thank you for pointing that out. Thank you. I will find.
I was noting that Guy said he wished he had attended this webinar before taking his org class.
I don't know. This might have been kind of intimidating for someone who's never taken any info org class, but you know.
Oh, he could have shown up some of his fellow students, probably.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're glad all of you liked the webinar, and we look forward to having you at our face-to-faces. So I'm going to look for your registration, Guy.
Okay. Yeah, there's the books and InfoOrg and cataloging and the intro classes. There's just not a good textbook nowadays, especially now that we're in this transition. It's hard. It's really hard. In fact, I use a textbook for just kind of the history stuff on my intro class, but otherwise I just use my own stuff. I use my own, in a sense, textbook in my beginning class, because it's just, it's hard to find a good textbook nowadays. But okay, so I updated the PowerPoint, which I'm going to send Luli and Jose now.
What about Luli and Jose? What?
Oh yeah, sorry, I updated the PowerPoint with the correct URL on this recommended reading list, and I'm going to send that to you guys right now. So I need you, so don't send out the one that I sent you previously, because this contains the correct information.
Okay.
So and I'll.
Oh look, Guy needs an indexing and abstracting webinar.
But he's taking it in the fall, so.
Yeah, so. Chop chop.
Mm-hmm. And hold on, let me just send this to you guys. And also I'm going to send if you guys don't mind sending out this other handout that I have that may be helpful. It's like a Charles Dickens authority record, and you can see it. I made a PDF of it so that you can send it out with the PowerPoint as well if you want, and it might be helpful.
Oh no, we are happy to give them anything that you think is helpful.
Okay. Okay. All right. Uploading.
Okay, does anybody have any
Okay.
last minute questions for Dr. Snow before we stop this recording? Any last minute questions for Luli or Jose? It's kind of like a board meeting. Any more business?
In our business? 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 Come on.
Okay, well, hearing no further business, I'm going to stop the recording, but I'll still stay in the room.
Okay.